History is full of examples of armies that were outnumbered being successful, of defenders, especially defending their country, being successful. I am very skeptical of those numbers of the report of, basically 500,000 Russian troops. That's not necessarily 500,000 fighters. Ukraine has that many troops. I think, of course, Russia has bigger numbers in certain places like around Bakhmut. But we know from history that the defender or the attacker usually requires at least a 3-to-1 advantage overall. And while Russia may have that in certain places, they still have not been able to do more than the occasional village. So I think people are focusing too much on these big numbers because they sound so terrifying. 300,000 Russians does not equal not even 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers in terms of quality. And the logistics system necessary to keep these Russian soldiers in the fight is very weak. And I think that the more that we help Ukraine attack that logistics, attack transportation, attack headquarters, attack ammunition, the more effective that they can be. But they need longer range precision capabilities.
About long range, will the U.S. government finally give permission for Ukraine to use HIMARS strikes on the territory of Russian Federation or Belarus? For example, to kill S-300, which are constantly shelling Kharkiv city?
Probably not. I don't know that. I think the U.S. the administration has been concerned about anything that would escalate. Of course, I believe that it is the right, it's international law, that it's the right of any country to defend itself. It's impressive to me that Ukraine has thus far resisted launching HIMARS strikes against Russian systems inside Russia. This is a difficult political question because keeping all the nations on side is also important. I would like to see Ukraine be able to strike Russian targets inside Russia if it meant that the support group, the Ramstein contact group, if countries begin to fall away. At this point, I think that would be unfortunate. But Ukraine does have some of its own capabilities. It has used some drones to go after airfields inside Russia, for example. And it's also interesting that Ukraine has not done anything against targets in Belarus. Why is that? I think this is also Ukraine recognizing to show restraint so that to not give Belarus a reason or provocation to come into the fight anymore. So all of us have to make these calculations. I think Ukraine will continue to do what it's been doing, which I think is to be very disciplined, very intelligent, very creative in when and where it strikes Russia. So I don't have a special advice for how the general staff should do something, on the 24th of February or whatever. I think what they do will be better than anything that I would have come up with. But they're not going to waste critical munitions just for assembly. I would say if that's all that Russia is able to do in Belarus, that's a good thing. I think Lukashenko really does not want to involve his soldiers in this conflict. He only has, I think, maybe 10 battalion tactical groups. I think he knows that they would be destroyed in days if they entered the fight because they are even less quality than the Russian formations are. I don't think soldiers of Belarus really want to fight against Ukraine and vice versa. I don't think people of Belarus really are interested in a conflict with people of Ukraine. So if Russia trains there in Belarus and that's it, and maybe gets some ammunition from Belarus, then I think that's not such a terrible thing if Belarus is not being more active in supporting Russia.
Why, in your opinion, the Russian army has focused on massive strikes over the past months on civilian infrastructure and not on military targets, which in fact is terrorist activity?
Yeah, it is terrorist activity, and they're all war crimes. And the list of war crimes is being recorded and monitored by the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and there will be accountability for this one day. In the meanwhile, they're wasting thousands of expensive missiles and drones and rockets against targets that do not give them any strategic advantage. This is a strategic bombing campaign that has not damaged or reduced the will of Ukrainian people. In fact, I think if anything, it's made it stronger. And at some point, the general staff has got to be thinking, why are we launching multi-million-dollar missiles against a power station that will be rebuilt in just a few days, or against a civilian target? So their objectives, they're failing on every aspect of this strategic bombing campaign. And I think the more they do this, the more it causes the West to also want to defeat them. It doesn't do anything to help Russia's cause, is what I'm saying. Well, I think my president has already warned Russia that there would be catastrophic consequences if Russia were to use a nuclear weapon. I think he's made that very clear, both in a formal public way and also in different channels. This has been communicated to the Kremlin. Do not do this. And I think the Kremlin believes that. I also don't believe that the general staff wants to use a nuclear weapon because they know there's no advantage. It would not change anything on the ground. It would not give them any advantage over Ukraine. They might kill more innocent people, they might destroy more towns, but it would not change the battlefield to their advantage. So why would they do something that gives them no advantage and for which they will suffer catastrophic consequences? In the Cold War, the Soviet Union had tactical nuclear weapons. So a tactical nuclear weapon is something that is much smaller than what was used against Hiroshima or Nagasaki, but it would have been used to create a gap in NATO defenses. And then you would have a mobile force that was properly trained and equipped to operate in a contaminated environment, either for chemical weapons or nuclear weapons. That doesn't exist anymore. There is no big mobile formation that's trained and equipped to be able to exploit that kind of a gap. And I don't think there's a place where Russia could use a nuclear weapon that would change that situation. So it's not practical. And of course, they're not going to use a strategic nuclear weapon, which are primarily aimed against the United States, because of what that would entail for Russia. And also, I think President Xi has communicated to the Kremlin, do not do this. Nobody in the world, even nations that are not sympathetic to Ukraine, except maybe Iran, nobody wants Russia to use a nuclear weapon. And I don't think that Putin is suicidal. He's cruel. He doesn't care about human life except his own. And so I don't think he is suicidal. And I think the people around him also are thinking about life after him. And that if they want to get back to anything that looks like normal, they will stop him from doing this. So this is why I'm very, very doubtful. I take it seriously, the threat, but I think it's extremely unlikely that they would actually do it.